Previously on Funny Science Fiction.
But then the second one, we go, is he? Oh my God, it's Khan. Really? You couldn't come up with something else? I mean, there's a million things you could come up with.
Hello, this is Josh Pruett, and welcome to the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
The podcast where we feature family-friendly sci-fi humor your mother would approve of, but never understand. That's right, Kathleen's back. And that's because we think that she hasn't been driven mad yet by her toddler. Or has she? I mean, she did volunteer to co-host again, so I'm pretty sure that this could count towards her burden of proof in her insanity trial.
Does me hiding in my mom's sewing room make me look less or more insane? I'm not sure.
Yes. Yes, we'll just go with yes. It's safer.
Makes sense.
All right, guys. Our guest today is Story. He's a writer. He's a story artist. He's a producer. He's Josh Pruett. Now, welcome, Josh. Glad to have you here today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching, you may know him best for his work on shows like Mystery Science Theater 3000, Milo Murphys Law, Phineas and Ferb, and we're going to talk about a few others that if you haven't watched, you kind of need to get to know his stuff. So needless to say, but I said it anyway, we're excited to have him here on our show for the good old Geek Fest.
Hey, everybody.
You know, I am super excited to talk to another Whovian, which is a fan of the British TV show Doctor Who, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, Tim.
I know what a Whovian is. I'm just not one of them. I'm trying to be. Does that count?
It does count. That does count. And that actually goes into my first question for you, Josh.
Yeah.
Your Twitter handle is Zombie Tardis.
Yes.
So obviously you're also a Whovian.
Yes.
So if you wanted to introduce somebody to Doctor Who, which episode would you start with, and why should Tim start with that one?
That's a great question. And I have a couple of different answers because I have two tiny ones. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so I've done this different like introductory experiments with them. So I've done showing them Blink, Moffat's Blink episode as a Dr. Light kind of safe, like walk your way into the world of Doctor Who. Because ostensibly it could just be a monster episode and there happens to be a time traveler in it.
Right.
And then kind of on the far side, I've showed my kids Robot, Tom Baker's introductory episode. And they love the humor of that episode in particular. We were just watching the Blu-ray this morning.
Awesome.
Just for fun because it's Saturday. And they still react to all the comedy, all the great stuff that Terrence Dicks was having Tom do as his introduction. That all went over great. And then my other recommendation would be there's lots of good David stuff. And I feel like Rose for Eccleston for 9 is still surefire. But the pilot, Peter Capaldi's first episode with Bill Potts, I think ticks pretty high up there as an introduction.
That is a good episode. As
a new modern character, that particular season I think is extraordinarily strong. The batting average that is really high, but I love that episode. It kind of relishes being Doctor Who and not something else. And it's just great stuff.
My introduction was Rose, so the first episode with 9.
Lovely. Yeah.
Because my parents watched it, and then when they brought it back, we had BBC America and it was airing, and I remember my dad sitting me down and like, no, you're gonna watch this and you're gonna like it.
That's so cool.
And I'm like, the first episode, it was the wait, what?
Yeah,
and then the end of the episode, it was the I need more. I need more of this. This is fantastic. Like
absolutely.
I need more.
Yeah, Who is really like that's my like I don't want to say my first love because I was maybe 8 or 9 when I watched it the first time. So like it even predates like my obsession with Mystery Science. Like it's like I was visiting my dad in New York. He happened to be living there for a little while, and this was when the classic series was on PBS. And so I remember I think it ended up being Seeds of Doom. There's like a guy going through a metamorphosis and he's like in the bathtub, and there's echoes of The Thing, which I hadn't seen yet at that age, and then I would go back later and go, I see what's going on here.
Mhm.
But I remember being totally terrified, and I think in my memory banks, it was either Seeds of Doom or Ark in Space, because Ark in Space also has a guy with his like bubble wrap hand, which is also really terrifying as he's turning into a bug.
Mhm.
And so I think in my head I've kind of merged those episodes, so there'll always be one special amalgam of Doctor Who.
Right.
But seeing Tom Baker for the first time, I was like, I love this guy. Who is this guy?
The fourth Doctor was my mom's favorite,
Oh,
which is why I have her framed.
Yeah, I love
photo
it.
of him.
I love that. It's so cool.
Like when I told her who I was talking to, and I'm like, he's a big Whovian, and she's like, do you want to put my picture on there? My picture can be on the internet. I'm like,
Perfect.
definitely.
It's perfect. I got this at Comic-Con like a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
like it's actually got K9. Like it's so fantastic.
Oh,
that's cool.
I love it.
I just
Actually,
watched
I get that reference. I understand that one.
Yay!
You're not just the tin dog, Tim. I'm proud of you.
That's right.
Shooty dog thing.
That was also my nod to Captain America. But yes,
Well, yeah.
I understood that reference. All right. So you also mentioned when you were talking there, Josh, about Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah,
And now that's the literal embodiment of a cult classic.
absolutely.
That you guys, you and your crew took on a pretty massive project in bringing back Mystery Science Theater through Netflix.
Yeah, it was. So I'll preface it by saying it's a dream come true to be involved at all. I think the first time I saw the show, I was like 13. I was at a buddy's house. It was 2:00 in the morning, and I was always the guy who was like, "Let's watch some bad horror movie." Like, all right, Josh,
Right.
whatever, fine. And it ended up being the giant Gila monster episode. And like no one, you get silly, right? 2:30 in the morning, you're 13, everyone's staying up late, everyone's eating too
As
much
you do, yeah.
junk food, right? As you do, like you do. And at some point I was like, guys, turn it up. Like, I don't care what you're talking about. Like, what are these things down at the bottom of the screen?
Right.
Like, they're like making jokes. And so like I had that kind of very universal experience of watching that show for the first time. And I'm definitely one of these people who's like, Trace Beaulieu like helped create the sound of my sense of humor.
Mhm.
Like Crow and Dr. F and like the tone of that classic show, like it ticked all my boxes, like comedy, sci-fi, horror, big dumb rubber monsters. Like I would never be able to invent something that ticked as many boxes as that did for me as a young person and as a creative person too. To then years later, kind of as I think all the fans of Mystery Science have a certain level of obsession about how the show was made and it being kind of this Cowtown puppet show. So it's like the more I learned about the show and how everyone had multiple jobs and it was very much all hands on deck, and Trey staying up late to build the first model of the SOL and everyone chipping in for the first version of the sets and the puppets, and Joel finishing everything the night before for the first records. So it's like I was obsessed with that process, that creative process. And I could relate because as a young person, I was always writing, but I was also drawing too. So part of my kind of creative journey also came from watching that show, the idea of doing more than one thing at the same time. Or like I always like to think of Buckaroo Banzai, like that first opening crawl, it says like, moving in lots of directions at once.
Right.
That's I'm paraphrasing poorly, but like Mystery Science was very much in my DNA as a young creative person. And so what happened was one of our editors, Lauren Christ, who worked with us on Phineas. I joined Phineas and Ferb like season 4 of that series.
Mhm.
And Lauren, who is a dear friend, I walked into her office one day. She's an animatic editor, so she's the first person who takes our storyboards and turns them into something that resembles a television program. And I walked into her office and she had a giant poster for Mystery Science, the movie. And so we hit it off right away, and we always had stuff to talk about and became dear friends. And she knew Jonah. She was friends with Jonah from back in the day. And so what happened was we had finished Phineas and I was moving on to other things. And Lauren asked me one day, she texted me, she said, hey, Jonah is a part of this remounting of the series. And my head already, like the back of my head already exploded. Just even with that, I was just like, that's so amazing. Like, oh my God, right? And she's like, Joel. And I was like, wait, like Joel Hodgson, Joel? And she said, and she was like, yeah, Joel is looking for a storyboard artist because, you know, this was like 2 years before the Kickstarter even launched. And
Okay.
so it's like they needed somebody who could, you know, help out, but for a price, somebody who was a fan, because there was no budget, there's no money. In classic Mystery Science form, there's no money.
Perfect.
And she was like, hey, do you want me to give your information to Jonah and Joel? And I was like, yes. And just kind of as a part of my own journey, like I didn't, even though I'd been storyboarding at that point for 7 years or so, I wasn't as confident in my boarding ability as I was as a writer. So at that point in my career, I was kind of like putting those things together as a writer, storyboard artist, and finding more success that way. And so I had a portfolio and a website. So always have a website, creative folk out there in the world. Always have a website, because at some point the creator of something you love might ask to see your work and you want to be ready.
There you go.
So I sent a text and sent a link, and she's like, yeah, Joel really loves your stuff. And I was like, what? and then I got an email and he's like, hey, this is the creator of Mystery Science Theater, and we need some help storyboarding Jonah's opening sequence, his origin story. So I got to work with one of my heroes, which was extraordinary. We went back and forth on the creative. Like, Joel had a script that he shared with me. I would put animatics together. It went through different, like, I would add stuff, and Joel's like, yeah, less of that or more of that. He was very open and collaborative. And there's like literal things that I put in there, like there's the fire extinguisher that the Mads have, and they've got those radio mics, and like that came directly from my storyboard sequence. So there's little things, like I put a box of Hamdingers in there, and like Joel's like, yeah, we probably don't need those. I was like, yeah, but I wanted to try. Like at one point I had a gag in there of like, I thought it'd be funny if Jonah had a pet constellation. And so I added like Sirius the dog. And so there was a moment where the constellation came and like bit the SOL because it looked like a bone. It looks like a bone. And then like takes it off screen. So he was just really open to me, like throwing ideas. And
Cool.
and I, that's really kind of my specialty. And so I boarded the opening so that they would have something to base like all the model builds off. Then they handed my boards off to Guy Davis, who's another hero of mine, who's a concept designer, storyboard artist. And, he designed kind of the final pass on everything. And worked with Seth Robinson, who is a producer and storyboard artist on the team. So
Nice.
like the final board was like my drawings, Guy's drawings, Seth's drawings, Joel's thumbnails. And that was just so cool. Again, it was like, it really was living through that Cowtown puppet show, creation. And in the midst of all of that, I was like, hey, can I write on an episode? Like, would that be okay? And, to my ever gratitude to Joel, he said yes. So I got to write riffs for Beast of Hollow Mountain.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Which was an extraordinary experience. It was so
nice.
Cool. So yeah, I got to put jokes in Crow and Tom and Jonah's mouths.
Nice.
Awesome.
Did you do your fanboy giggling in front of everybody, or did you wait for the drive home, like driving your car and holding onto the steering wheel? Like,
it was really tough. Like, Joel actually bought me breakfast one day, which was so cool. And we got to we shared sketchbook drawings. And I didn't get a picture with him, and I regret it to this day because he doesn't live on the West Coast. But I tried to be as cool as I could. I tried to be as cool cucumber as I possibly could, and I kind of saved the geeking out for once the show had come out.
Nice.
and just got to like gush online. Also at the Kickstarter wrap party, like the final countdown that they did at Meltdown, which sadly doesn't exist anymore in
Okay.
LA. It was a comic shop. But I got to come to that and met Felicia Day ever so briefly.
I would
but
die.
I died a little bit.
I would die. Oh my
I
word.
brought my fan club card. And so she interviewed me for like 10 seconds. And at that point, I had already been drawing her as Kinga for, over a year. But that was great. That was a major highlight.
That's cool.
Because I still have like one of the original sweaters from the Info Club that I bought when I was like 15 years old. And like if I wash it any more times, the plastic is gonna just crumble off of the thing. So I keep it lovingly in a box.
There you go.
So one show that you have contributed to and that I am currently enjoying is The Last Kids on Earth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like an apocalyptic world filled with monsters, action, adventure. So what does it mean to be a creative contributor?
So so I'm going to tell you the lame version and then the cool version.
Okay.
So the lame version is that it comes down to it's a legal precedent that has to do with it being Canadian co-production.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the lame version. The cool version is I was working on that show with Scott Peterson, my dear friend, and the creator of the book series, Max Brollier, the writer. And we had a wonderful writing team, people who I love to death. And the way that show got produced, and in my experience, the best way to write a show like that is that once everyone's had their first pass and everyone's given notes, we all pitch jokes on each other's episodes. And so in a different set of circumstances on a show like Phineas or Milo,
mm-hmm.
we were able to get staff writer credit. And the reason I really like that and advocate for that is because that acknowledges that as a writer, everyone is helping at every stage. Because on something like Phineas and Milo, we're pitching jokes at the rewrite stage. We're pitching them again at animatic. We are sometimes then pitching more jokes when it comes back from color and they're rebuilding the show. And so on Last Kids, we were helping at every stage. And so the folks at Atomic were trying to find some way to acknowledge that contribution. And that's how they came up with that. Haley Mancini and Jen Moreau, who also were writers on that show, we all did that for each other. And it comes out of a very open and collaborative writer's room. Excuse me. And you want to make everyone look like a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
So you give freely of those ideas and jokes, and as Shakespeare said, plays the thing. The show's the thing. So you want everything to sing. You want everything to be really great. And our showrunner Scott, he really set tone that it was really an open forum that way. And I think it shows in the finished product. I've worked on things where it's not that open. And you can kind of feel it. You can feel jokes kind of die on the vine, or just lay there, And the beautiful part about animation is that it tends to be a really iterative process. As I'm sure, like you talked about Dan, that's the nature of the beast. Dan's also really great about that too.
Yeah.
Hey, Nick, do you think he was talking about our jokes dying on the vine?
Just yours,
sure.
Tim.
Just mine. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, it's got to be shotgun approach, you guys.
I thought that's what we were going for.
There you go.
Goals. # goals.
And how do you get so you were saying how you get a lot of people in the room and you're all just kind of bouncing off ideas. So how do you get some of those creative juices flowing, and what is something that helps you to be more creative?
That's a great question. I think some of it is working on your own stuff. Some of it means you're giving some to the job that you have, and you also, and that kind of is replenished by things that all your own personal projects. And so what I have found is that when I'm working on something for me, whether it's a book, like Scott and I have done a couple books together, or it's comics, or those kinds of personal projects, they can fuel the day job. And so that way you come in and you're less precious, and you are much more open, and you're much more flexible. And I've found that the more I do, the more I can do. I tend to be a pretty ambitious person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also having that feeling really safe in that environment, like I said about showrunners setting tone, your producer is setting tone, where it's a place where you can just pitch whatever. Like the first couple things I worked on when I was at DreamWorks, when I started as a story artist, not all those rooms were open to hearing pitches.
Gotcha.
So I learned kind of early on that's where I functioned and contributed at a higher level, is where I was able to throw everything out. But that's where I learned that there were a lot of filmmakers and leaders, the ones who had other things, other irons in the fire, they were a lot more open to everyone chiming in and everyone helping. There's this kind of funky thing where it's like, look, your name's going to be on the poster. So at some point, I started to gravitate toward the folks who realized that, and they weren't sweating good ideas. And certainly that's been my experience with Scott Peterson and Max, and that's been my experience with Dan and Dan and Swampy, is that they have a good track record, and the folks who aren't insecure, they're not going to sweat a good idea.
Right.
And I think that's the thing I've learned over time, that's the mark of good leadership. Because your name's on the poster, you're going to be in the articles. Very few people, only wonderful podcasts like this, even know who we are most of the time.
Aww.
And just even Dan recommending me is like a perfect example, because not everyone's going to do that. They want the spotlight for themselves, maybe, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I think having that environment where it's safe to do that, man, that keeps my creativity up here. We talked, one of the last shows I worked on, Onyx Equinox, over at Crunchyroll. Sophia Alexander really created a kind of special room with Jen Moreau, who I worked with again. She was the head writer. And we talked about this thing early on where, and I'm sure you three have experienced this in different arenas, there's this idea that if it's just a job, you leave it at the job. It doesn't matter what the job is. But if you feel appreciated, you will problem solve all weekend. You'll be thinking about things that you will, I'm going to fix that on Monday. That's better. Or, I'm going to go adjust that this weekend. It'll take me 20 minutes. No big deal. But when you feel appreciated, and when you feel like your contribution matters, like, that's free time that they are gaining from you as a creative individual. That's free work. Like, there are times on Onyx where, like, I had an idea on the freeway, like I was driving in downtown Burbank, and I was like, I should pull over. Oh crap, I got to write this down. Sorry. Oh shoot, I got to write this down.
Right.
And I pulled over and I put it on my phone. But you get those for free when you feel appreciated, because your brain just goes and goes and goes and goes. And, if the next time you think about work, you're like, oh man, that person's so unpleasant. There's so much work to be around. They didn't even tell me one thing about their script my script that they like, that can wear you down.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you didn't even know it, but you segued into my next question, which makes me think that you've seen my outline.
Creeper.
But so I wanted to ask you about Onyx Equinox because, and again, it's an original show made for Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
That's kind of a departure from some of the more family-friendly things that you've worked on, like, Last Kid Standing or Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphys, things like that. So what was the thing that you enjoyed most about this show? Because of seeing that it was a departure,
Mhm.
And what about this show allowed you to kind of flex your creative muscles, so to speak?
That's a great question. Yeah, it was, I'm going to tell the friendly version. So Jen Moreau was contacted. Jen's worked on Star Wars. She's worked on everything. She's worked in the superhero world, and she and I met on Last Kids and really hit it off. And she's a really special person. I adore Jen. And when she had this opportunity to be head writer on Onyx, it was going to be an adult show, 17 plus. It was going to deal with some like adult issues in that, it was dealing with suicide and depression, like things that aren't normally dealt with in animation, period. And so there's a tremendous opportunity there. But when they sent me the materials so I could have my first interview, it was packed with monsters. And I didn't know that's what it was going to be.
Okay.
And so I flipped out. I called Jen and like yelled at her over the phone, like, you didn't tell me it was going to be monsters. And then Sophia and I ended up bonding kind of over our love for Alien and the Xenomorphs. And like, that's my first love as a creative. So
Nice.
like, I remember being like, I was like 12, like when Jurassic Park came out. Like I remember they did an in-depth kind of behind the scenes in Cinefex magazine, which sadly just closed their doors like 3 weeks ago. They've been around for 40 years. But they had concept designs by this artist named Crash McCreary, who was one of the concept designers for Stan Winston Studio back in the heyday. And I thought I wanted to be a concept designer when I was that age. I wanted to draw monsters for a living. And I wanted to draw, Tremors is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think that's a perfect movie. And, I love Army of Darkness and like, I love monster movies. I love zombies. I love that, that's that other part of me. And, that's part of why my handle is Zombie Tardis, is that it's that, that wonderful fantasy world of, even though it's sci-fi, so much of Doctor Who is ostensibly fantasy, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Man in a magic box, right?
Right.
And then the zombie is my horror love. So I'm like, put those things together. So
Yeah.
like Onyx was an opportunity for me to do that. Like this is my, you can even see it, my Primeval shirt, like Full Moon, David Allen production, stop motion. The Full Moon.
Check that out. Nice.
Chef, Puppet Master, all that stuff when I was a kid.
Okay.
So like that was major. So I got to flex my horror love muscles. Like I wanted to like, and there's some dark stuff on that show, but also very human. It was something that was really important to us as writers, as a team, and really important to Sophia, that we were telling human truths, but the delivery system for that was going to be really gnarly creatures. And so I jumped at that.
Nice.
I jumped at that. And so I also got to do lots of jokes and brought humor to the show, which is something that Jen and I talked a lot with and kind of negotiated with Sophia, because that wasn't her kind of go-to. But like I got to kind of bring to bear what experience I had up to that point, but then also dig into passions that I'd never been able to do in a professional capacity. It was so exciting.
Excellent.
That is really cool. So on a totally different topic, because
Sure.
that's how we roll here.
Yeah.
I know I already mentioned your Twitter handle, and I'm going to sound like a total Twitter stalker right now.
That's
But
okay.
you have retweeted a video from TikTok.
It's
where
a
this
light
guy,
stalking.
Well, it happens. So you retweeted this video from TikTok where the guy bought shelving from a local video store that was closing and built the video store in his basement instead of finishing his kitchen cabinets, which
Yes.
the tone in his wife's voice then. I'm like, oh,
I know,
he's in
and
so much trouble.
And Kathleen, she adds that at the very end, and I was like, whoa, it was like all love. It was cool. And then go ahead, keep going.
So
I'm only kind of bitter.
Yeah.
right? But as a wife, I'm looking at that with the I know that tone.
There was
I
a
know that
conversation
tone.
that didn't happen that should have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you're not writing during the pandemic, how have you been spending your time? Do you have any Have you built a video store in your basement?
Oh man, I wish. I actually have. I built like the front a fake Tardis that
Oh, awesome.
I had years ago, and so I was thinking about that being like finishing it out, over the pandemic. But it's been rough. Like we have having 10 and 12-year-old, like actually just kind of keeping going through this thing has been a real challenge. So one of the highlights last year was I got to co-write the Last Kids on Earth video game, which was a brand new thing. But as far as like other hobbies, like, man, I was like hustling and hitting the pavement a lot last year. We got into kind of as a family a little bit into retro gaming, which was cool.
Oh, that would be fun.
And like we went and picked up a Super Nintendo, which I never owned just because of my age bracket. Like we were playing the NES and then I had other friends who got the systems kind of after that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of cool to share with the kids. Video games have been kind of a lifesaver for our family, I think.
Yeah.
I think
they've been a lifesaver for a lot of families.
Yes, absolutely. And so we've been hunkering down a lot. We've been watching. I showed them Tremors for the first time last year, so that was kind of major. So right now we're in a place where like, oh, we're talking but like, great, like let's watch Ghostbusters, or oh, we can maybe like, I'm trying to figure out like how soon I can show Army, because Army like it's like cusping. Like Evil Dead 2 is like way out there, but like
Right.
Army is might be a little closer. But we watch Ghostbusters, we watch Tremors, and they're starting to get it. They're starting to see that fun tone where science fiction can be funny too. Horror can be funny too.
Mm-hmm.
And I obviously that's one of my favorite things.
Tremors was one of my dad's favorite movies.
Absolutely.
I would be tempted to tell my kids that Tremors is Dune. So I mean, there's worms.
Dune fan too, man. I love Dune. We also hit up the drive-in.
Nice,
that was so cool for the first time. There's a place out here, Mission Tiki drive-in I think it's in Claremont or Montclair, and those are right next to each other. But that was such a cool
not confusing at all.
Yeah, right? It's so weird. You literally pass the exit, it's all Claremont, Montclair. But that was so rad. So I think we saw Croods in the drive-in. We saw Monster Hunter in the drive-in. It was just awesome. Brand new experience to expose everybody to, and yeah.
That is cool. I think Croods is what my husband just told me our daughter is watching right now.
Oh, that's
excellent.
So cool. My buddy Joel Crawford is the director. He and I started at DreamWorks together.
Oh, that's
Nice.
Yeah, he's a
awesome
guy. Yeah.
So no, our Facebook page is filled with a bunch of memes, and it has often come from the combination of different universes. You kind of already mentioned a couple universes that you were like, oh, I just love to smash these two together.
You bet.
So which other universes would you like to see smashed together?
That's a great question. I remember one of the things that I was into the concept of was like when Full Moon started, when Charles Band started Full Moon, and they started doing crossovers between the characters in these horror movies, and it was very much like Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was so into that idea. And I remember I bought the first like Alien versus Predator like comic, was a huge influence on me as like an artist and a like creative person. Like I remember like I drew my own Alien versus Predator like crossover pitches. Like I had this whole idea where there was a museum that was an homage to the crew of the Nostromo, and like they had these tubes that would come up with real life xenomorphs, and then at night they would go down, and then there was like a subterranean world where the aliens lived, and then during the day they would come up and be display cases, display animals like a zoo, and that's going to end well. But I kind of like the crossover. Like I like this like Kong and Godzilla thing that's coming up. I'm really jazzed about that. There's like obviously there's a precedent, but I think I remember them talking about other kind of horror movie crossovers, and it's like sometimes you feel like there's got to be a way to do it where it doesn't break it. Like I remember I was one of these guys who was reading all of the, fan fiction for a lot of, different stuff, science fiction, horror, like when that was big as a community and people were posting screenplays and all that cool stuff. And it's so funny when you think about how like, people who write fan fiction, it's like, they're just practicing their chops. You're just learning your chops. And like, so many of the writers who ended up writing for Doctor Who in the new series, they were writing fan fiction when they were watching the show when they were a kid. So I think I'm a huge Trek fan. I really like Next Generation. So part of me feels like, having Picard meet the Doctor would be just cool.
That would be awesome.
like and I think they've done, I want to say that there's like IDW did some crossover stuff that like I think they may have done a series. I'm trying to remember now. But I remember thinking about that, like, oh, it'd be so cool. Also, I think for me it's more like, where could I go and take that blue box show up and that be a thing? Like, where else could that show up? And
instead of just in London.
Yeah. And yeah, it goes to London so much. He goes to Earth so much.
He's got a thing for Great Britain. It happens.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I have a curiosity.
Everybody says it north.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's like a long-winded, non-specific answer to that question.
That's okay. We like long-winded, non-specific answers.
Cool.
We're good. So I do have a curiosity, though. What would happen if Burt Gummer showed up in Dune?
Well, that'd be pretty awesome.
Right?
I feel like he would get the spice and he'd like have new awareness. And he'd probably get the leg up on them in a way that he hadn't before.
Burt running around with some bright blue eyes.
Oh man, he'd probably have an issue with his still suit, but I feel like as a survivalist, like he could get used to it pretty quick.
He'd make it happen.
Yeah.
All right. So also, whilst doing some light stalking,
yes,
on Twitter,
you have to get questions. It's just part of the job.
It's yes. We will now heretofore call it research.
Yes.
So I noticed on Twitter that you seconded someone's wish that Douglas Adams was still around to write about what's going on in the world around us.
Yeah.
So what was it about Adams' writing style or his content that inspired you, or just inspired you to like his stuff overall?
I think it was like I ended up I did this weird post and ended up getting into it with some people online because there's some strong feelings, but I like some of H.P. Lovecraft's writings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as
Lovecraft.
an unabashed racist and anti-Semite, as a human, it absolutely puts a shadow over a lot of his work. And I think one of the reasons that we come back to it, other than the kind of innovation and certainly the mythos with Cthulhu and all of that, but there's an idea of someone who was so full of fear who looked out into the darkness of the universe and saw only terror. And I think the thing that's so interesting about Adams is that he looked into the ridiculousness and the black vastness of our universe and existence, and he found humor.
Yes.
So it's like they're looking at the same, obviously the prism that they look at the world is different, but like you can look in the same abyss, you can stare into the same abyss, and one guy sees jokes and somebody else sees abject, indescribable terror. And I feel like there's a reason why, as gross human persons, that we have sense of humor. And I think Adams was so brilliant at reminding us what a superpower that is, that it's a survival superpower, and that it's the thing that actually is going to help us negotiate that black abyss. And I mean, it's one of the few books I ever read in my life. The first book probably I ever read that I laughed out loud. And I remember I was taking a, my friend Casey bought me like the like giant Barnes and Noble book of all of it at the time.
All 5 books of the trilogy.
Yes, exactly. The increasingly misnamed
That's how he worked.
the trilogy. But like I was taking like a painting class as a part of my art major, and every break I would rush outside and sit and read. And I was laughing out loud, and I was like, I can't believe I'm laughing at this. Like I had never experienced that before. Like, you know, books were amusing, or I read something that was kind of, oh, that's a cool idea, that's funny. But like I was laughing out loud at what I was reading. And like the way he describes, like, you know, flying being, you know, tripping but not hitting the ground. Like there's just brilliant stuff. And I think the thing that kind of clinched it for me, because I didn't know this, is then going back and again that Cowtown puppet show behind the scenes interest that I always have. Like when you go back and you read about his life, he wrote Hitchhiker as a sample, and that's what got him the gig for Doctor Who, where he was a story editor for a year and a half. He co-wrote or wrote under a nom de plume some of the best episodes that Tom Baker ever had. And I didn't know that. I was already a Tom Baker fan, but I had no idea that he'd ever contributed to the series. So there's a time in Adam's life where he is literally writing the radio play, the book, and Doctor Who at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And that completely blew my mind. And it kind of showed light on a lot of things about me feeling schizophrenic as a creative person and not unsure where I needed to be headed. And then seeing someone at the kind of the beginning of their success, like having to do more than one thing at one time, and having all of these incredible opportunities in front of them, but all of it stemming from a very specific point of view and worldview. And it was that radio script. That radio script got him work when he needed it most.
Yeah.
And it was a terrible, painful thing to write for him at the time. But like when I put all that together, I was like, that's one of those cornerstones for me as a creative person. To be able to, as much as I love horror, I absolutely do. I love all that stuff. But the idea of bringing humor where there's darkness, like that's a heck of a way to live, I think. But also, I think as a creative person, like that's what people need.
Nice.
I wrote a huge paper on Douglas Adams in my AP English class. I love his writing.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Like as soon as I saw Tim's question about Douglas Adams, I'm like, oh yay!
Yeah,
we're gonna go down that rabbit hole. That's a fun one.
So cool. Yeah, I think.
And then just comparing him to Lovecraft is just total polar opposites. But like you said, it is that same abyss they looked into.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, they both have, you know, tremendous gifts of invention, the world building. I mean, you know, as creative people who've made things that have lasted. Like, you know, I feel like there's always this funny thing when people talk about movies or books, or, you know, talk about, you know, what's going to stick around. It's like at some point you're able to kind of suss out, and you can't always say why, you know, there's not always a clear explanation, but the recurring theme is a certain amount of humanity. You know, it's like, you know, I love Superman. I have strong feelings about Superman. And, you know, I think there's a reason 75, 80 years later, we're still talking about Supes. You know, I think there's a reason that we still talk about the Cthulhu mythos. Like there's a reason that these things kind of connect and set our imaginations on fire. But there is something about, universal fears and aspirations that as a creative person, like I find myself drawn to over and over again. Part of my path has been, I've always, like as a kid, I was just into the idea. I was just into the monster or the cool concept or the sci-fi conceit or the fantasy conceit. And that's all my work was. I was just thinking about that, writing short stories that were weird and funny, strange. But what I've learned over the course of my career, and I've been at this for 15 plus years now professionally, is like the humanity is the thing that connects people. So that's how you grab, you grab people with the conceit and you keep them with the humanity. You keep them with the characters. The best example I always have of this is like something like Phineas, which has a very similar formula shape for every episode, and we change the elements.
Right.
You don't come back expecting, you want the characters. You come back for the characters. Shows like NCIS or shows, these procedural shows, they all follow a very similar shape. People come back for the characters. So they want to see those people that they love. I think that's part of our job as storytellers, is creating characters that people love.
Excellent. All right. So Josh, we've enjoyed talking with you. We have loved your as you called them, nondescript answers that were actually very descript. They were more descript than you gave them credit for, sir. But thank you so much. But before we let you escape,
yes,
we have to play a quiz with you. All right. So we do this with every guest.
All right.
We have a 5-question quiz.
Okay.
All right. And now here is the rules of engagement, sir.
Okay.
If you get 3 questions correct, we're going to send you one of these here lovely I gave to the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans mugs.
Fantastic.
If you get 4 questions correct, we are also going to send you, along with a mug, a copy of this book.
Oh, cool.
Custodians of the Cosmos. So Drayton Allen, that's the pen name of Nick's dad. Nick's dad is the founder of our Facebook group called Funny Science Fiction.
Awesome.
So you can see where we got our super cool podcast name from.
Right.
But he started that group, and it was basically based off this book, which is all about a gentleman who tried to get into Starfleet, couldn't hack it, so he came back as a custodian to boldly clean up after those who had boldly just went.
So good.
So and we'll make sure that if you get the 4 out of 5, we'll make sure that Drayton puts some calligraphy in the front of it for you. Okay?
Oh, that'd be fab.
All right. Now, however, if you get less than 3 answers correct, in other words, if you only get 2 out of 5, we take a picture of you and we make a meme out of you. We call it a fun. We call it a fun sequence.
I have a feeling that's going to happen anyway.
Well,
I don't know. Give yourself some credit here.
I will say that the last time that the 3 of us were on camera together and had to do anything with somebody who worked on Milo Murphys Law and Phineas and Ferb, it ended in a meme.
I'm sure it did.
With a pretty floral bonnet.
I saw that was pretty good. Yeah.
Ben was very gracious.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so we've got the 5 questions.
Okay.
3 get the mug, 4 you get the mug, the book, and some vandalism in the book. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, and this is all Doctor Who related.
Fab.
All right, Nick, take it away.
Who is the first Oscar winner to play the Doctor?
Oh, and these are multiple choice, by the way. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Forgot to tell you that.
David Tennant, Tom Baker, or Peter Capaldi?
Peter Capaldi, and he won it for a short film that he made.
Awesome.
All right, 1 for 1.
What was the name of the probe which provided the A-positive human blood to the Sycorax? Was it Guinevere 1, Guinea Pig 1, or Guivenart 1?
Guinevere 1.
It was Guinevere 1.
Yeah.
I just watched that episode last week.
2 for 2. All right.
Really, Tim? I feel like this is a lobbed question.
Hey, you know what? Not all of them can be challenging. I'm trying to be nice.
He's trying a new thing. He's going to be nice.
What planet does the Doctor come from?
Oh, Gallifrey. Come on. In the constellation of Castavros.
I will now go ahead.
And he went to Brighton Academy. Come on, guys.
Told you they
going
were
to-
too easy, Tim.
I'm going to go hide my head in shame.
I mean, not that I don't want to say those words on a podcast, because I do.
Well,
So
see,
in that regard,
you are welcome, sir. I knew that. I knew I was doing something right.
yeah, I want to
There we
talk
go.
about Gallifrey. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
All
there you go.
right.
All right.
Question
My
number
next
4.
question is writing for Big Finish. So when that happens, I will come back and we'll talk about that.
There you
Awesome.
go. And you got yourself the mug.
Woohoo!
Question 4. What is written on the bomb that Captain Jack stops from destroying the Chula ambulance? Octung Wolf, Bad Boy, Go to Your Room, or Property of Torchwood?
Oh shoot! It's Octung Wolf, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
It
'Cause it
is
was a
because it's
little
part of
too
the Bad
early for-
Wolf's.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
It's part of the Bad Wolf storyline.
Bad Wolf storyline. Because I was going to say it's a little too early for Torchwood. Even though that's, I mean, we're going to get that like top of next season.
I
Like,
Yeah.
threw Torchwood out there just to try and.
yeah.
That's what I did.
No, that's very good. That's very good. Very good.
Also a Time Lord, but the Doctor's enemy is Voldemort, River Song, or the Master.
The Master. Okay, also bonus. I want to give myself bonus. So there's also the Ronnie, who's not necessarily a nemesis. Then there is the monk.
Mm.
Then there is Neil Gaiman invented one, the Corsair. There's a couple more that they've named, which is so cool. But
I
anyway,
told you it was too easy.
I'm just adding.
Well, now we just got to give you all of Tim's wall back there.
You get all of Tim's Funko Pops.
Yay!
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
I may have to fight you for those.
But you did win yourself a book as well.
Oh, I'm
so-
thrilled! Yay!
And the mug.
Awesome.
And some vandalism of the book. So we'll make sure that. So after we say goodbye to everybody else, stick around. We'll make sure that we get your shipping address and information, and we'll get that out to you. Okay.
Fab. Thanks, gang. That was fun.
What's
Yeah.
fun?
So
Oh, it's me.
it's
It
you.
is you.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
why it's color coded.
So, Josh, where are the best places for people to be able to find out more about you and your works?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Zombie Tardis, ZOMBIETARDIS. That's on Instagram and on Twitter. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/zombiejosh.
Awesome. We will be sure to place those in our description so that people can find you and all of your works.
Thank you.
All right. Now remember, kiddos, that subscribing is the single most important thing that you can do to ensure that we get more super cool guests like Josh here and have some more funny moments for you to listen to. So please subscribe to our podcast. It helps more than you're ever going to actually realize. But make sure that you go to I just had a brain fart. Oh, please make sure that you go to Twitter and Instagram as well. Check out Josh there and check out his works. If you're into the anime style, go check out Crunchyroll, see Onyx Equinox and some of that kind of stuff. Check him out there. He's got some really cool stuff on Netflix as well. With the Last Kids show, Mystery Science Theater's on there. There's a lot of cool things for you to check out, and of course, Phineas and Ferb and Milo Murphys Law. So you're not gonna be lacking for cool things to watch that Josh has been part of.
Oh,
you
and can I plug really quick, Tim?
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Plug away, my friend.
So I want to plug really quick an original middle grade book that Scott Peterson and I wrote called
Yes.
Shipwreckers, the curse
nice.
of the cursed temple of curses, or we nearly died a lot.
We nearly died a lot.
So this is, it actually used to be a lot, and they said that it was too long for the cover. But Scott Peterson and I wrote this together. It's a fun for the whole family middle grade novel available at all good bookstores and retailers. And it's kind of like what would happen if Indiana Jones was a dummy, and the kids actually have to do all the work and get them out of danger. So there's
All right.
mystical treasure hunting and lots of big fun in Shipwreckers.
Awesome.
Interesting.
Well, cool. We'll make sure to add that into our listing information as well. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Now, remember, if you're not happy with the content of today's show, all you have to do is let us know. Please send a handwritten letter in triplicate form. One for the master, one for the doctor, and one for our records. The first one, either the master or the doctor, to successfully deliver it to the Daleks and leave from them in one piece gets to decide the fate of the offending party.
Thank you for being on our show, Josh. This was a lot of fun.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kathleen. Thank you, gang.
Yeah, this has been a great time.
So long, and thanks for all the fish. See ya.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Our show is brought to you by our charity sponsor, the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund, which supports the Wish Upon a Teen Foundation that helps out sick kids when they need it most. And just imagine the comfort you'll give Red Shirt Crewman number 66. He'll know that when he puts on the red shirt when aliens come to give superpowers but accidentally use the death ray 3 days after the peace negotiations of episode 42, that he didn't leave his family destitute and without hope, because the Red Shirt Widows and Orphans Fund has his back and his left ear.
On behalf of the rest of the hosts of Funny Science Fiction, we'd like to thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to be a guest on one of our future episodes, please contact us by means of our Facebook group, Funny Science Fiction. You can find us on Twitter or Instagram using the handle @FunnySciFi, or you can go to DraytonAllen.com and click the Contact Me link at the bottom of the page. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Copyright 2020 by Drayton Allen. Original music by Jordan Michaels. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned in this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of or by Funny Science Fiction or its sponsors. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at DraytonAllen@DraytonAllen.com.